I didn't become the strong one because I wanted to be. I became her because someone had to be, and no one else volunteered. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 27 years old, and if you were to flip through the photo albums in my parents' living room, the ones meticulously arranged by year, holiday, and mood, you might think I had the kind of childhood you see in cheesy holiday commercials. The kind with fireplaces glowing, perfectly wrapped gifts under the tree, and family dinners full of laughter. But what the pictures don't show, what they could never show, is the weight I carried even before I knew what it meant to be burdened. I was born first, on a cold February morning that iced over the roads and forced my dad to shovel the driveway at 3 a.m. just to get my mom to the hospital. From the very beginning, I came with complications. I was colicky, allergic to everything from formula to synthetic baby wipes, and completely uninterested in sleeping through the night. My mom later joked that it was her baptism by fire, parenting crash course edition. Sophie arrived 2 years later like she'd been sent to save us from ourselves. She was beautiful, even as a baby. Big hazel eyes, soft brown curls, and a laugh that made strangers in grocery stores pause and smile. While I had been difficult, Sophie was charming. She slept through the night, smiled on cue, and cooed at anyone who would listen. Our relatives would say things like, "Emily was your trial run," and laugh like it was harmless. Like I didn't hear every word and press it down into a part of myself I didn't know I'd spend years untangling. My parents, Alan and Lisa Carter, were good people. Honest, hardworking, middle class to the bone. My dad worked maintenance at the local school district and fixed every appliance we ever owned like he was competing in some invisible Olympics. My mom ran the front office at a dental clinic, managing paperwork and gossip with equal efficiency. They loved us both, at least, that's what I told myself. But love can sometimes look a lot like uneven expectations when you're the one quietly absorbing the overflow from someone else's chaos. When I was 10 and Sophie was 8, our lives fell into a quiet, relentless routine. My parents worked long hours, sometimes overlapping shifts, and Sophie, sweet, creative, utterly unpredictable, needed supervision. So I became that person. The supervisor. The stand-in mom. The one who helped with homework, reminded her about brushing her teeth, and ran interference when she accidentally broke another picture frame while practicing dance routines in the living room. I never once heard, "Thank you." Not from Sophie, not from my parents. It wasn't neglect in the way people think of it. It was a quiet assumption. Emily can handle it. Emily's responsible. Emily doesn't complain. So she must be okay. But I wasn't okay. In high school, my friends would make plans to go to the movies or the lake after school, and I'd decline every time. I couldn't leave Sophie. My parents couldn't afford a sitter. And even when they were home, they'd still lean on me. They'd say, "You know how she gets. Just keep an eye on her for a bit." A bit always turned into hours. Then came the car. It wasn't a good car by any stretch, an old Civic my dad had picked up cheap from a friend at work, but it was mine. I'd saved birthday money, worked weekends at the library shelving books until my fingers were numb, and finally, at 17, I had something that gave me a little freedom. That lasted 3 months. Sophie borrowed the car without asking one night. She was 15, didn't have a permit, and wanted to drive to her friend's house to talk about art. What she didn't mention was that her friend lived across town, and she planned to stop at a party on the way back. She totaled it hitting a curb, was lucky to walk away with nothing more than a sprained wrist and a scratch on her forehead. My parents were livid, but not at her. "She's young, Emily. She didn't know better. That car was old anyway. You'll get another one." And just like that, it was gone. Sophie got a new car on her 16th birthday, a shiny red Corolla with a big bow on the hood like we were in a commercial. I bought a second-hand Ford Focus with peeling paint and a broken window motor after working double shifts all summer. College was a dream I clawed toward on my own. I got a partial scholarship to the state university, commuted an hour each way to save on dorm fees, and worked 2 jobs, one at the bookstore and one at a 24-hour diner that paid in grease burns and exhaustion. Sophie, on the other hand, went to a private art school in Vermont for a semester before dropping out because the vibe wasn't right. My parents pressured me to be patient, to understand that not everyone has it together right away. "She's just finding herself," they'd say, as if I hadn't been forced to find myself in grocery store aisles, learning how to stretch $30 for a week of meals. I kept telling myself this was love. That love meant being there. Love meant sacrificing. Love meant holding the ship steady while the others took turns jumping off. But beneath that calm surface, beneath the polite smiles and tired nods, was something else. A quiet, yawning exhaustion that curled itself around my bones and whispered things I wasn't ready to admit. I was tired. I was angry. I was hurt. And still, I told myself that it was okay. That this was just the season of life I was in. That once Sophie got it together, once I graduated, once things settled, it would all balance out. I didn't know then that the balance was never coming. That the people I was sacrificing everything for weren't even keeping track. That being the responsible one didn't mean being seen. It meant being expected. That's the thing about being the foundation. No one ever looks at you until there's a crack. And mine? It was coming. When I turned 25, I celebrated by buying myself a leather-bound planner, the kind with inserts and dividers and thick cream pages that made pen ink look elegant. I told myself it was just a tool to track client accounts and meetings at the firm, but I knew the truth. That planner was my declaration. I was no longer reacting to life. I was building it, brick by brick. I had been working in finance since graduation, starting out as a junior analyst at a regional firm and slowly grinding my way toward promotions no one handed me. I kept my head down, took night courses to get certified in portfolio management, and kept a laminated chart of my goals tucked into the back of my planner like a talisman. And at the top of that list, always, was the same thing: down payment, $60,000. Owning a house had never been a romantic notion to me. It wasn't about white picket fences or kitchen islands or Pinterest dreams. It was about safety. It was about finally walking into a space that couldn't be taken from me, used against me, or filled with someone else's chaos. I didn't want a mansion. I wanted peace. I opened a high-yield savings account in my name, or so I thought. It was from a joint account my mother had set up for me when I was 12, meant to be educational at the time. She'd co-signed it so I could deposit the babysitting money I earned watching Sophie and the neighborhood kids. I assumed it had rolled into full ownership once I turned 18. I never thought to check if her name was still on it. I had no reason to doubt it. After all, I was the responsible one, remember? While I clipped coupons, meal prepped on Sundays, and negotiated raises like a tightrope walker over a canyon of male egos, Sophie tried her hand at everything short of crime. First it was a sustainable fashion line that involved bulk ordering wholesale scarves and claiming they were ethically sourced. Then came the lash extension business she ran from our parents' basement, which lasted 3 months and ended in a minor fire that she blamed on a faulty plug. My parents, ever supportive, laughed it off and helped her pay the damage deposit she lost after being asked to vacate the space. Everyone's journey looks different, my mother told me one night over dinner as she passed Sophie another helping of lasagna. Not everyone finds their path at the same speed. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and focused on cutting my food into even bites. Because what could I say? That I was tired of cheering from the sidelines while I carried the whole damn team? I started spending my weekends going to open houses, not the staged luxury ones with imported marble countertops, but the kind of homes that had scuffed hardwood, windows that stuck in the summer, and character. I walked through narrow hallways imagining where I'd hang prints from local artists. I stood in cracked driveways and pictured sipping coffee on the porch, alone, in silence. That dream grounded me. And then, just as the house vision started to feel like something real and not a distant fantasy, Mark entered the picture. We met at a friend's engagement party I didn't want to attend. He was the cousin of the groom, a high school English teacher with a crooked smile and a voice that made literature sound like gospel. He asked me about my work, not to gauge my income or size me up, but because he was genuinely curious about what financial planners actually did. We ended up talking for 2 hours straight while everyone else danced, his hand occasionally brushing mine on the armrest between us, subtle and steady. Mark was different. He didn't play games or need fixing. He showed up early, asked questions about my day, and made me feel seen in a way that wasn't laced with expectation or entitlement. When he met my parents, he brought flowers for my mom and helped my dad relevel a wonky picture frame in the hallway. Sophie barely looked up from her phone when we walked in. "I like him," my dad said as Mark and I pulled out of the driveway that night. "He seems solid." That was the highest praise my dad gave to anyone. And it meant the world. Over the next few months, the house fund grew. Bonuses from work, side consulting gigs I picked up helping young couples budget, even birthday cash from relatives who didn't know what else to give me. It all went into the fund. I crossed the $50,000 mark in early May and treated myself to a $4 almond milk latte as celebration. I sat on a park bench, sipping slowly, watching kids chase each other between the trees and letting myself believe, truly believe, that I was close. It was Mark's idea to turn the house purchase into a surprise. "You've worked so hard for this," he said one evening as we folded laundry together. Imagine walking them through the door and saying, "Look what I built. Look what I did on my own." I pictured it then, my mom's eyes widening as she took in the kitchen, my dad clapping my shoulder in that wordless way of his, Sophie standing a few steps behind, maybe finally realizing that the person she'd taken for granted had become someone remarkable. I didn't need their validation, not really, but I wanted them to see. Just once. The offer I placed was on a 2-bedroom cottage with faded blue shutters and a sloped roof that would need fixing come winter. But it had a sunroom, and a little garden out back, and enough light to make the floors glow at sunset. I put in the offer myself, negotiated the terms, and signed every document with a trembling hand. The acceptance came on a Tuesday. I was at work, midway through a budgeting consult, when my realtor texted me a photo of the signed contract. I excused myself to the hallway, pressed a hand to my mouth, and let the joy ripple through me like light breaking through a dense forest canopy. I called Mark first, then the realtor, then a locksmith, because I'd already learned that security was never guaranteed, and I wasn't leaving that to chance. That weekend, I planned the reveal. I asked my parents to meet me for lunch near the neighborhood where the house was. Told them I'd found a little cafe with great soup. Told Sophie to come too, even though I doubted she would. She texted back a thumbs up emoji and nothing else. On Saturday morning, I picked up pastries from the farmer's market, brought flowers for the kitchen table, and hung up a "Welcome Home" sign in the entryway. It was cheesy, but I didn't care. It was mine. All of it. The chipped banister, the uneven tile in the laundry room, even the faded wallpaper in the guest bathroom. It was all finally mine. I stood in the middle of the empty living room, clutching the keys in my hand, when my phone rang. It was the bank. "Ms. Carter," the voice on the other end said, too calm to be good news. "We just wanted to confirm that you authorized a full withdrawal from your high-yield account this morning." My stomach dropped so fast I had to sit down on the bare floor. "No," I said, my voice clipped and sharp. "I didn't authorize anything. What are you talking about?" The teller paused, and I heard the sound of keys clicking in the background. The funds were transferred in full to a checking account listed under L. Carter. "That would be your co-signer, correct?" My mouth went dry. I couldn't make sense of the words. "My account has a co-signer?" I asked, my voice thin with disbelief. "Yes," she said. "It appears the joint designation was never removed after your 18th birthday. Standard for youth accounts unless formally updated." I couldn't breathe. My mother had emptied the account. All $61,000. Without a single word to me. I sat on the floor of my brand new house, my symbol of independence, my carefully assembled dream, and stared at the front door as if expecting her to walk through it, holding the money in one hand and an apology in the other. But of course, she didn't. I called her. 5 times. Straight to voicemail. I called my dad. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Emily, hey, aren't we meeting you in a bit? We're just parking now." "Dad," I said, the words catching in my throat. "Where's Mom?" He hesitated. "She's with Sophie. Something about a down payment for a commercial space she's leasing. I don't know the details." "Why?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just hung up. Because I knew, deep in my gut, that I was too late. That everything I'd built, every hour, every sacrifice, every dollar, had just been handed over to the one person who never earned it, who never deserved it, and who would never, ever understand what it cost. And the worst part? She wouldn't even say thank you. The moment I saw the balance, I thought it was a glitch. My thumb hovered over the screen, blinking, waiting for the numbers to recalculate, to fix themselves, to realign with the reality I had so carefully shaped. But the truth was absolute in its simplicity: $0. My savings account, my meticulously maintained, high-yield fortress of independence, was empty. No pending transactions, no transfer history I could dispute. Just a final debit of $60,000 processed at 7:14 a.m. that morning. I felt like the ground shifted beneath me, as if the air itself turned too thick to breathe. My chest tightened, not with panic, but with a kind of cold, seeping disbelief that settled into my bones. I was sitting at the edge of my new kitchen counter, coffee untouched beside me, a bag of unpacked light fixtures on the floor, and for the first time in my adult life, I couldn't move. I didn't even bother calling Mark first. I called the bank. The woman who answered had the kind of syrupy phone voice that makes you want to believe the world is still in order. I gave her my details, confirmed my PIN, and then asked, as evenly as I could manage, to walk me through the last transaction on my account. "Certainly, Miss Carter." "One moment, please," she said, typing away. "Yes, I see here. A full transfer of $60,000 was authorized this morning. It was transferred to an affiliated account registered under L. Carter. I blinked. L. Carter? I repeated, the syllables slicing through my disbelief like slow-moving blades. Yes, she confirmed cheerfully, unaware that my entire reality was recalibrating in real time. That's listed as your joint account holder. Typically a parent or guardian if the account was opened when you were a minor. My mother? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. That can't be possible. This is my account. I've been managing it alone for years. I understand, Miss Carter, she said, her voice suddenly careful. But unless the joint account holder was formally removed, they maintain full access to all funds. The call ended in a haze of procedural sympathy and promises of internal reviews. I barely heard any of it. I just sat there, staring out the window of a house I might no longer be able to keep, knowing with the sickest certainty that my mother had done the unthinkable. I called her. She didn't answer. I called again. And again. Then I called my father. He picked up on the second ring, and his voice was casual, almost upbeat. Hey, sweetheart, what's up? Aren't you setting up the new place today? Dad, I said, the words struggling to push their way through the tightness in my throat. I just got off the phone with the bank. The savings account, my down payment fund, it's gone. There was a pause. A beat too long. I heard him exhale slowly. Emily, listen. Before you get upset. Is Mom with you? I cut in, my voice trembling. Yes, he said. She's here with Sophie. They went to pick up the SUV. Sophie needed something more reliable for her clients, and it's part of her business expansion. You used my house fund to buy Sophie a car? I asked, disbelief curdling into something far more dangerous. You took my savings, my entire life savings, so she could lease a luxury car? There was another long silence, broken only by the faint sound of Sophie's voice in the background, loud and carefree. It's not a lease, he said. They bought it outright. She said it was a better investment image-wise, something about branding and presence. I ended the call without saying another word. I don't remember grabbing my keys. I don't remember walking to the car. I don't remember the drive to my parents' house, except that it started raining halfway there, and I never turned on the wipers. Everything felt loud inside me and eerily quiet outside. Like the world had entered some kind of vacuum, and I was just floating, unmoored. Their driveway was full. Sophie's brand new black SUV gleamed like a promise kept under the gray clouds, parked arrogantly where my dad's truck usually sat. I walked up to the front door and knocked once, twice, then let myself in with the key they'd never asked me to return. They were in the kitchen. My mother turned first, her expression a practiced mix of calm and calculated deflection. My father looked sheepish. Sophie stood between them, her acrylic nails tapping on her phone screen, too bored to look guilty. Emily, my mother said as if this were a family brunch. I was going to call you later today. You stole from me, I said, cutting her off. You didn't call. You didn't ask. You just emptied my account and gave my future away like it was spare change in your coat pocket. My mother's face hardened. Watch your tone, she said sharply. We didn't steal. You weren't even using the account right now. You already had the house. I hadn't closed yet, I hissed. The escrow isn't finalized. That money was still part of the required assets for the transaction. Do you even understand what you've done? Sophie finally looked up. Relax, Em. It's not like you can't save it back. You're good with money. You'll be fine. I turned to her, staring as if I'd never seen her before. You took my entire future to buy a car. It's not just a car, she said, rolling her eyes. It's an image. It's my livelihood. My work is public-facing. You don't get it. You're right, I said. I don't get it. Because I never asked you for a single thing while you burned through handouts like they were dryer lint. My mother stepped in, her voice tight with authority. That's enough. You're not being fair. You're young. You have time. Sophie needs this now. And that was the moment it snapped. Not my temper, not my voice, but the last thread of belief that they would ever see me as more than a reliable reservoir they could draw from at will. I walked outside into the rain. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I walked with my back straight and my hands shaking, my knuckles white around my phone. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, soaked and silent, before I called the bank again. This time, I asked for a manager. I gave her the details slowly, clearly, like I was reading from a legal deposition. Yes, the account was opened as a minor's account, I said. But I've been the sole contributor for over a decade. And I'd like to know if there are any legal protections or recourse for withdrawals made without the knowledge or consent of the primary financial actor, especially considering that the funds were used for personal gain unrelated to my financial plan. There was a pause. Then she asked me to wait while she brought in someone from the trust division. Trust division? I wasn't aware this was a trust account, I said slowly. It was, she confirmed. The account you've been using was originally established as a custodial UTMA account. Once you turned 21, ownership should have transferred completely. It seems that transfer was never processed properly. That's on us. That changed everything. Because if my parents had accessed the funds under the guise of a custodial claim, then they had just violated a very specific, very traceable set of rules. Would that qualify as misappropriation of funds? I asked. Yes, she said carefully. And depending on the amount and intent, it could be escalated as financial abuse or fraud. I didn't speak. I just listened. I took notes. I recorded the call. By the time I hung up, the numbness was gone. What remained was something else entirely. Stillness, calculation, clarity. I didn't call Mark. I didn't text anyone. I just opened my laptop, found the folder I'd titled House, and added a new subfolder called Recovery. That night, I didn't sleep. I drafted emails. I made a spreadsheet of every transaction. I logged every message, every voice memo, every document. I printed my account statements and highlighted every deposit I had made over the last 9 years. I found old pay stubs, birthday checks, tax returns. I gathered everything. Because this wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a difference in values or a generational blind spot. This was theft. And no one, especially not the people who had raised me, was going to get away with pretending it wasn't. It began with a letter. Not the kind you frame on a wall or hide in a shoebox, but a formal notice from the bank, sent via certified mail to Sophie Carter, informing her that her primary accounts had been frozen pending a fraud investigation. The funds she used to purchase her luxury SUV had been tied directly to an illegally executed withdrawal from a custodial account that no longer belonged to my mother, an account I had owned, alone, since the day I turned 21. The SUV was gone within the week. Repossessed at the corner cafe where she'd parked it like a billboard for the life she thought she deserved. I didn't see it happen, but my cousin, whose boyfriend worked at the cafe, texted me a photo. There was Sophie, standing in heels she probably couldn't afford, mascara streaking down her face, watching a tow truck hook her symbol of success and drag it away under the gray wash of early morning rain. My parents were stunned. They called me from 3 different phones, left voicemails laced with disbelief, sorrow, and not-so-subtle accusations. Emily, this is your father. Please call us back. There's been an issue with the bank. We're sure it's a mistake, but we need to talk. My mother's voice, by contrast, was composed, clipped, and practiced. We need to discuss your recent actions. I'm sure you didn't intend to escalate things this far. But it's gone too far, Emily. This is family. Sophie sent one message, a single text reading, WTFM? Seriously? I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I poured myself a cup of herbal tea, sat down at my desk in my still bare house, and opened the file labeled Boundaries. I had a checklist, emotional, financial, legal, and I'd only just begun working through it. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't spite. It was clarity. And that clarity tasted sharp, clean, and long overdue. By the time the legal department at the bank called to confirm that charges would move forward unless the involved parties agreed to a repayment plan, I had already spoken to my lawyer. We discussed my options with the calm precision of someone who had been planning this quietly in the dark corners of her mind for far too long. The fallout was immediate. My parents showed up at my front door 2 days later, uninvited and unannounced. I watched them through the peephole, their faces drawn tight with concern and righteous confusion, as if they couldn't fathom why the daughter they raised to be so mature would do something so humiliating. I opened the door and stepped outside, not letting them cross the threshold. My mother was the first to speak. Emily, she said, her eyes scanning my face for weakness. You need to stop this. Now. You're tearing this family apart over what? Some money? That money was my life, I replied, keeping my voice level, though my hands trembled behind the door. You're being dramatic, she said, with that same tired, dismissive tone she used when I was 12 and Sophie broke my science fair project and I cried in the hallway. My father looked pained, as if being forced to choose between allegiance and fairness was a punishment he hadn't signed up for. We didn't know she'd actually use it, he said weakly. We thought she'd pay it back. And if she hadn't been caught? I asked, narrowing my eyes. Would you have told me then? Would you have helped her cover it up like always? They didn't answer. Instead, my mother's expression turned icy. How could you do this to us? And in that moment, one I will never forget, not even decades from now when they're gone and the pain has dulled into memory, I looked directly at them and said, "No. How could you do this to me?" My mother opened her mouth, but no words came. My father took a step forward, but I raised a hand. "I'm done being your safety net. I'm done being the one who makes things okay just because I can handle it. I'm not your second parent. I'm not your problem solver. And I'm not your excuse." I closed the door slowly and locked it. I stood there for a long time after, forehead against the cool wood, tears slipping silently down my cheeks, not because I regretted it, but because it was the first time in my life that I had chosen myself over their comfort. And that choice was as liberating as it was excruciating. Later that evening, I packed a bag and checked into a hotel across town. Not because I feared retaliation, but because I needed space, physical, emotional, psychological. I needed to be somewhere my body didn't automatically tense every time my phone lit up. The next morning, I sat across from my therapist, a soft-spoken woman named Clara, who had helped me unravel years of tightly wound guilt like a patient surgeon removing embedded shrapnel. "You didn't just draw a line," Clara said gently, after I told her everything. "You moved the entire fence." I nodded, staring at the tissues in my hand. "And it feels like I just orphaned myself on purpose." "No," she corrected me. "You didn't orphan yourself. You just stopped pretending the place you came from was home." Over the next few weeks, I did something I had never done before. I focused solely on myself. I applied for a first-time homebuyer grant, a modest program meant to support women like me who had been financially misled by family or spouses. The paperwork was brutal, the questions invasive, but the approval came with a dignity I hadn't anticipated. Using the recovered funds from the bank settlement and the grant assistance, I bought a modest 2-bedroom condo in a quiet building with a view of the city skyline. It wasn't the cottage I'd dreamed of, but it was mine. No strings, no secrets, no shared keys with anyone who didn't respect me. I didn't tell my parents I was moving. I didn't send them the address. Sophie posted a story on Instagram about her haters trying to ruin her journey, followed by a selfie in front of a leased car with a caption that read, "Setbacks are just setups for comebacks." I blocked her. I blocked my mother too. My father texted me once, "I hope you're okay. I miss you." I didn't reply, but I saved the message. Mark proposed a month after I moved. He did it quietly, in the kitchen while I was cutting fruit for breakfast, sliding a small, elegant ring across the counter like it was part of the grocery list. "No flash," he said, smiling. "Just certainty." And I loved him, I did. I loved the steadiness in his hands, the way he never rushed me to open up, the way he left the light on when I worked late and kept the kettle warm even if I didn't ask. But when I looked at the ring, something inside me didn't leap. It didn't hum. It hesitated. He noticed. "You don't have to say anything," he said, squeezing my hand. "I just wanted you to know where I stand. Where I'll always stand." I cried that night, not because I was afraid of saying yes, but because I finally understood what it meant to choose someone without losing myself in the process. And I wasn't sure I knew how to do that yet. So I asked him for time. He nodded, kissed my forehead, and didn't ask again. It's been a year since the fallout. A year since I stopped being their crutch. A year since I took off the armor they'd asked me to wear and learned what it meant to be unguarded. And it's hard. It's lonely. It's beautiful. Sometimes, I still reach for my phone out of habit when I'm cooking, thinking I'll call my mom to ask about a recipe. But then I remember she never really taught me to cook. I taught myself. Like I taught myself how to earn, how to budget, how to love without strings and walk away without apologies. I'm still learning how to trust. Still learning how to soften. But for the first time in my life, I'm not carrying anyone. And that, in itself, is a kind of freedom I never thought I'd taste. By the time I turned 36, my life no longer resembled the blueprint I'd spent my 20s drafting with anxious precision and desperate hope. The house I stood in wasn't the cottage I once pictured or the condo that had served as my sanctuary after the fallout. It was newer, roomier, with mismatched furniture that held stories in every stain and scratch, and a kitchen table perpetually cluttered with markers, snack bowls, and tiny shoes I was forever tripping over. But more importantly, it was mine. And it was peaceful. The morning light filtered through linen curtains as I stood barefoot in the kitchen, rocking my daughter against my chest while the kettle whistled gently behind me. Her breath was warm on my neck, her small hand curled against my collarbone, and I felt, perhaps for the first time in my entire life, safe in a way that didn't require vigilance or sacrifice. Mark moved around the kitchen quietly, prepping lunches and checking his phone for substitute schedules. We married 2 years after I finally said yes, when I knew, without doubt, that I could love him fully without abandoning myself in the process. He hadn't pressured me. He waited, patient and steady, like he always was, because he wasn't trying to rescue me. He simply wanted to walk beside me. That made all the difference. We bought this house just outside the city, far enough for space, close enough for work, and every decision we made about it, from the color of the nursery walls to the locks on the back gate, came from joint intention, not inherited obligation. I had a home, a daughter, a partner. But most of all, I had clarity. That clarity became my compass the day Sophie reappeared. It started with a message request on LinkedIn, of all places, one of those, "Hey, stranger," greetings that feels more like a door creaking open than a true invitation. I stared at it for a long time before accepting. She asked to meet. She didn't say why. I agreed, carefully, on my terms. We met at a small cafe halfway between our cities. I chose an outdoor table. I came alone. She arrived looking tired, still beautiful, always beautiful, but thinner, with that stretched tightness around her eyes that spoke of mounting pressure and dwindling options. Her smile was cautious, her hug hesitant. She talked fast, as if words could make up for years of silence. She mentioned her newest venture, some influencer agency she had co-founded that recently collapsed under a pile of unpaid invoices and a lawsuit she didn't want to get into right now. And then she asked for help. Not much, she claimed. Just enough to hold her over until she got her feet back under her. She even had the gall to frame it as a kind of repayment. "You always believed in me, Em. And now I need that belief again." I took a long sip of my tea, set the cup down slowly, and leaned forward. "Sophie," I said, meeting her eyes with the steady calm I had earned over years of therapy, hard choices, and rebuilt trust in my own instincts. "I do believe in you. But I won't fund you." Her face faltered for a split second, long enough for me to see the panic ripple through the mask. I continued, my voice gentle but unmovable. "You're not asking for belief. You're asking for rescue. And I don't do that anymore." She started to protest, said something about family and how hard things had been, but I raised my hand, and to my surprise, she stopped. "I'm not angry anymore," I told her. "I'm not here to punish you. But I have a daughter now. I have to show her what boundaries look like, what self-respect feels like. And that starts with not rewriting the past just because you finally want to acknowledge it." We sat in silence for a while. Then, quietly, she nodded. And I left. I don't know if that moment changed her. That's not my responsibility anymore. What I do know is that it didn't change me, and that's how I knew I was healed. My parents reached out a few months later. They'd heard about my daughter's birth from a cousin and wanted to meet her. The message was long, carefully worded, and devoid of the manipulative guilt tactics I once knew so well. I sat with it for weeks, talked it through with Mark, revisited every journal entry, every letter I'd never sent, and every sleepless night that followed the day I stopped being their crutch. When I finally agreed to meet, it was in a neutral space, a park, in broad daylight, with Mark beside me and my daughter in a stroller. My parents looked older, smaller somehow. My mother's voice had lost its sharpness. My father's shoulders sloped more than I remembered. They brought a small gift, organic cotton onesies, tastefully wrapped. It was the most unassuming offering they'd ever made. The conversation was tentative at first. But when my mother said, "We've made mistakes," and didn't follow it with a justification, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I told them the truth, not with bitterness, but with boundary. "I won't cut you off," I said plainly, "but I won't let the past repeat itself either. If you want to be in our lives, you will respect the lines I draw. You will not undermine me. You will not pressure me. And you will not compare your grandchild to anyone else. You will treat her as her own person. Not a second Sophie. Not a redo." They nodded. We didn't hug. But we did say goodbye with civility. That was enough. Later that week, I finalized the documents establishing my daughter's family trust. Not because she's rich, she's not. Not yet. But because I wanted to build the kind of financial foundation I never had. One with walls. One with locks. One that couldn't be accessed under the guise of family needs. Her trust is protected by multi-layered legal mechanisms. It requires dual verification for any withdrawals, with oversight by a third-party advisor. The funds will only be accessible at set life milestones, college, a first home, a medical emergency. And no one, not even me, can repurpose it under emotional pretense. Because love without boundaries isn't generosity. It's a blueprint for exploitation. I also launched something small, just a side project at first. A mentorship group for women who, like me, grew up bearing the emotional weight of households that treated competence as permission for neglect. Women who were labeled the responsible one so early that they forgot what it meant to be cared for. I teach them what I wish someone had taught me at 18, how to read financial documents, how to set up their own accounts, how to spot manipulation disguised as family loyalty, how to say no, especially when it hurts. Every month, we meet online, mothers, daughters, sisters, survivors, and we talk. We share. We undo the myths we were raised with. And every time one of them tells me, I finally opened my own account, or I told my brother no for the first time ever, I feel like a crack in the ceiling has been sealed. We are healing ourselves, quietly, fiercely. Tonight, I'm alone in the backyard. My daughter is asleep against my shoulder, her breath soft and even. The stars blink above us like old promises being kept, and the porch light glows a steady amber beside the wind chimes that Mark insisted we hang for ambience. The grass is cool beneath my feet. The air smells like lavender and grilled corn from the neighbor's barbecue. And for once, there is no tension between what I have and what I deserve. I look up at the house, its soft lines, its imperfect windows, its sturdy frame, and I feel it, deep in my chest, the kind of peace that doesn't come from closure, but from creation. I built this life. And this time, no one gets to write me out of it.